derivados del PSA, como es el índice de salud prostática. ¿Qué evidencia hay en el índice de salud prostática? Para ello tenemos al doctor Jean-Sébastien Blanchet, Senior Manager, Market Access and Scientific Affairs, Global Health Economics and Reimbursement, Beckman Coulter, Francia.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you very much, the organizers, to give me the opportunity to give this presentation today, and especially Dr. Astobieta. So obviously, I do have some kind of a conflict of interest here, but I promised you I'm going to present you only very good clinical data, and I will try to show you how the prostate health index with this clinical of evidence could be involved and could be used into the clinical practice. So I just would like to start, as previously shown, with some recommendation from the European Urology Association, really recommending for early prostate cancer detection a risk-adapted detection with trying to define at the individual level the risk, a risk strategy to identify early prostate cancer detection, mainly using a baseline PSA determination in order to define the appropriate screening interval. But they also, as shown previously, they also mention that in order to avoid unnecessary biopsy that may be related to the false positive results of PSA, they recommend to use risk calculators and also additional serum tests, including the prostate health index. So the prostate health index is, oh, sorry, I should do that. Oh, I messed up everything. Oh my God. Let's try again to do this. Sorry, yeah, here we go. So the prostate health index is based on the serum determination of the concentration of a molecular isoform of the free PSA, which is in fact the -2 pro PSA molecule. So the prostate health index is a combination, again, sorry, I'm sorry, I'm just using this. Okay, so the prostate health index is the combination of the total PSA, free PSA, and -2 pro PSA, the determination and the concentration of molecules in the serum, and it's just a combination with a simple mathematical formula that has been clinically validated. So as you can see, there is no involvement or any other information such as DRE or age in this formula. So this is a simple immunoassay test that can be done on the Beckman immunodiagnostic test instrument, and is really recommended to be done within this gray zone of PSA where there is a lot of false positive test results. So how do we interpret, we propose to interpret the test is really to define the probability of detecting a prostate cancer if the biopsy is performed based on the level of the PHI test here. So this test is recommended for PSA for men with a PSA between 2 to 10, and according to the PHI level, then a probability of detecting a prostate cancer will be identified. And in that case here, for example, with a man of a PHI of 21, there is only less than 10% chance that the biopsy will be positive and the prostate cancer will be detected. So there is 90% chance that the biopsy will be negative. So there is now a lot of publications showing this clinical performance and confirming the clinical performance of the PHI index. I just would like to share with you this one, which is from a multicentric European study between France and Germany, regrouping 1,300 patients with a prevalence of 50% of cancer in that case. So you can see from the ROC curve analysis here, the improved area under the ROC curve for the PHI test as compared to PSA and free PSA, showing an increased sensitivity and specificity. And here you have the increased specificity at 90% sensitivity for the PHI test as compared to PSA and free PSA. So detecting the same level, at the same sensitivity, detecting the same number of cancer, then you will have an improved specificity. So it means more true negative patients detected and potentially less unnecessary negative biopsy performed. So, but how do we make sense of this clinical performance from a clinical point of view in the clinical practice? So one way to look at this data set is to stratify the patient according to the PHI level here, and to look at for each of these category of patients, what was the percentage of positive biopsy which was identified when the biopsy was performed, because in this study, all patients were biopsied. And when you do that, you can see that still again for this patient between PSA of 2 to 10, when the phi was above 80, then there was 90% of these patients in this cohort that in this category here, when the biopsy was done, there was 91% of patients that had a cancer detected. And when phi was low here, below 29, in that case, there was 80% of biopsies that was negative. So this stratification of the patient according to the phi index and looking at the percentage of positive biopsy really helps to stratify the risk of detecting prostate cancer, and really helps to make an informed decision when you have a patient between 2 to 10 whether or not to biopsy. Then using this type of information, then you can make a better informed decision on the biopsy. From this data set, it was possible to discriminate the patient from initial biopsy, from repeated biopsy, and doing the same analysis here, you can see the same risk stratification for the patient at initial and also at repeated biopsy, which is quite interesting information to have when you decide to rebiopsy a patient. What is really important if you are about to delay a biopsy is really to understand whether you will be missing a clinically significant prostate cancer. And from exactly the same data set, the clinically significant prostate cancer could have been identified with the PRIAS criteria for indolence, and the same stratification was represented here. And again, you can see that for a patient with a phi above 80, as I showed you previously, there is 90% chance that there will be a cancer, but from these data here, you can show there is also 1 chance out of 2 that this cancer will be a clinically significant one. But the most important aspect is when the phi is low, because in that case, there is 80% chance that the biopsy will be negative, but from these data here, you can also see that there is less than 10% chance that a clinically significant prostate cancer will be missed if you delay the biopsy. So there is several publications describing this correlation of the phi index with the clinical significance of the cancers, and I'm presenting here a very recent paper from a German team looking at the pathological analysis of nearly 200 patients, and you can see in this graph here that the tumor volume was related to the phi value, and a larger tumor here with a higher Gleason score, here in red or in green, would have a high phi value in those patients preoperative, obviously, and also a smaller tumor with lower grade, a Gleason 6 patient here, the yellow spot here, showed a lower phi value in most of the cases. So there is it's a good demonstration of the correlation of the phi index with a clinically relevant prostate cancer based on pathological analysis, looking at pathological Gleason score, PT stage, or even tumor volume in that case. So we talk about a multivariable risk prediction, and I told you that the phi index is just a combination of biomarker and there is no additional clinical information involved. If you want to have a fair comparison with a 4K score, you have to use this risk calculator, because in this risk calculator here, you are incorporating also additional information on top of the biological information, and especially the clinical data. So, and this, in this publication here from the US from last year, they were showing that the phi index was improving the multivariate risk prediction for aggressive prostate cancer. And this was shown with a PCPT risk calculator, where the phi index, when incorporated into the multivariate model, was significantly improving the area under the ROC curve, and it was also shown with the ERSPC risk calculator, when introducing phi into the model was really clearly improving the predictive accuracy of the model. And I would just like to mention one publication from 2015 where Monique Robot described how she incorporated the PHI index into the Rotterdam prostate cancer risk calculator, and that could be really easily available on smartphone, and then you can enter the clinical data on top of the biological data, PSA and -2 Pro PSA data, the PHI results in a way, to get predictive accuracy on the detection of prostate cancer and detection of aggressive prostate cancer. And in this publication, there was also a good comparison with the nomogram, which has been developed by Giovanni Lucchezzani, incorporating PHI. And so I would like to stress the point that if you would like to have a fair comparison between the 4K score and the PHI index, you have to use this risk calculator, because the PHI doesn't include these clinical data. So, what is currently important for early prostate cancer detection, and especially for deciding upon the repeat biopsy, is really the use of imaging technique like multiparametric MRI and targeted biopsy. And now there is starting to have some reports showing how PHI could be implemented into these settings. And this is a study from the UK, from Cambridge, and in the UK, in fact, a multiparametric MRI is recommended to decide upon a repeat biopsy. And from these data here, you can see that when the biopsy decision was made only on the MRI, then you were missing a significant, some aggressive prostate cancer. But when the PHI index information was added on top of this MRI information, the sensitivity was really significantly improved, and a significant number of aggressive prostate cancer of Gleason 7 or above could be in fact detected in that setting. So really the PHI index could be really positioned versus the MRI to capture some aggressive prostate cancer that may have been missed. And this was shown from the same report, looking at the negative MRI. In this publication, they didn't use the PIRAD score, but in their grading system, they identified a negative MRI. There was 94 cases in this situation, where there is no lesion, no target to biopsy. And using the PHI index at various clinical decision points, then you can, in fact, reduce the number of prostate cancer and aggressive prostate cancer that could have been missed. So really putting the PHI index within the MRI when it's negative will help to reduce the number of aggressive prostate cancer that could have been missed by the imaging techniques. The relationship I was mentioning regarding PHI and aggressiveness of the cancer may also play a role in positioning the PHI index for selection of patients with active surveillance. And to illustrate that, I would like to share with you this publication from 2016 from an Italian group, where they look at the pathological characteristic of 188 cancers from patients which were treated with radical prostatectomy, but these patients were eligible for active surveillance according to the PRIAS or to the Epstein or the PRIAS criteria here. But when they look at the pathological analysis of these cancers, they still found a certain number of significant cancer. So the Epstein and the PRIAS criteria were not fully able to identify these insignificant prostate cancer. So what they did is that after they look at how the PHI index could improve, in fact, the probability of insignificant prostate cancer. So they built a multivariate model with the Epstein criteria or the PRIAS criteria, and they introduced the PHI index into this model, and they saw a very significant improvement of the area under the ROC curve when they were incorporating PHI, either in the Epstein criteria or with the PRIAS criteria, with a significant gain in predictive accuracy by between 32 or 40% here. This is also working with the PCA3, but in a lesser extent. So this is a good example that the relationship of the PHI index with aggressiveness could make sense in order to predict the probability of insignificant cancer and help, in fact, to selecting the right patient for active surveillance. There is another publication, which is a poster from a group in the UK, where they were showing that they were testing the 5 patients before active surveillance, and they followed the patient for 5 years. And they showed that the patient with a phi below 27, 95% of these patients after 5 years were still under active surveillance, while when it was above 35, then there was 1 patient out of 2 that was out of the active surveillance protocol, showing that there was a progressive disease. So really low phi value would predict a good probability of insignificant prostate cancer. So now, how do we, what could be, in fact, the impact of using phi into routine clinical practice, whatever is the routine clinical practice you are having, and in other words, what is the clinical utility for the phi index? And part of the answer to that question came from a publication last year from the US, from the Johns Hopkins University. And what they did is that they compared a prospective group of patients for which they would provide the phi information in all of them before they will decide to do the biopsy or not. And they compared this cohort of patients with a contemporary group of patients without the phi information, and in that case there was 1,300 patients in that situation. And when they did this comparative analysis, they really showed that the phi group of the patient receiving the phi information, they really showed a reduction in the number of negative biopsy in this group as compared to the group without the phi information. So obviously, the number of no biopsy patient was increasing in that situation. But what is really important is to look at here the proportion of aggressive prostate cancer. It's exactly the same. So the number of negative biopsy have been reduced, but the probability of detecting aggressive prostate cancer in the clinical practice is the same. So the reduction of negative biopsy is not compromising the detection of clinically significant prostate cancer. So from a biopsied man in this cohort here, they were able to show that 91% of men with a phi below 27 had no cancer or Gleason 6 cancer. And at the opposite, when they look at patients with phi above 55, then 76% of them had an elevated Gleason score with a high grade of 7 or above. What was also very interesting in this publication here is that they looked at the patient that received MRI as part of their routine clinical practice, and they were plotting that against the phi value. And from this graph here, you can really see that a phi was really informative in the PIRAT-3 patient, where all the patients that have been biopsied with a high-grade cancer here, they did have a phi elevated value here. Which is quite interesting to see, because you can, in fact, identify those patients here with the phi value, and you will be capturing, again, it's also similar to the data from the English study. You will be capturing the clinical significant cancer that would have been missed maybe with only the MRI data. And what was also interesting is that below 27 here, there was absolutely no clinically significant prostate cancer here in PIRATs 1, 2, and 3. So that was quite interesting to see, and also some high-grade cancer were identified from the PIRATs 1 patient. So really, the phi test may have a role to play in coordinating, in addition to the MRI determination, in order to reduce the number of unnecessary biopsy while preserving the detection of clinically significant prostate cancer. I think I will finish here, just concluding. Just to mention that there is now more than 100 publications around the prostate health index. There is now 3 meta-analyses, and there is a recent meta-analysis from an Italian group showing the analysis of 16,000 patients that received the phi index, looking at how the phi was, in fact, improving the individual risk assessment for early prostate cancer detection and the potential reduction of unnecessary initial or repeated biopsy. And I think there is now a lot of publication showing the relationship with the clinical significant prostate cancer, also looking at pathological analysis of the cancer. And from this, I think the PHI could have a place within the clinical practice for a selection of patients for active surveillance to identify the most insignificant prostate cancer and to predict, in fact, the most insignificant prostate cancer. We are working now with a Rotterdam group on the PRIAS active surveillance protocol to look more into this, into the added value of the PHI index in these settings. And finally, we may have a place for the PHI test in the clinical decision strategies that are including multiparametric MRI and targeted biopsies. I think I finish here with some questions if you may have.